Good morning, everybody. This is Guy from Bluehub. We're just going to give it a couple more moments just for everybody to join. So just wait patiently and then we will start in about 1 to 2 minutes. So for those that have just joined in the last 30 seconds or so, we're just going to give it another 30 seconds to a minute just for the other attendees to join, and then we will begin. Thank you for your patience. So fantastic. It looks like now we've begun to have a few more people join and it's starting to slow down a little bit. So we will begin shortly. So just as a general introduction, this webinar, Is Your Client Too Big for Xero or QBO, is part of a series. And in this episode of the series, we're going to be covering the wholesale sector. We're also going to have a look at e-commerce and manufacturing in early 2018. So we're going to be pushing out a lot more of this webinar style content because we found that accountants are really calling out for it in answers to some of these questions that we're all dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So just so everyone's got context, the majority of the people that are in the audience today are accountants, so that's really where I'm going to be aiming at this. I'm sure there are 1 or 2 business owners on the call too, who are looking to get the most out of their use of Xero, but it is really going to be aimed at accountants. So just quickly off the top, a bit of an introduction. My name's Guy Earnshaw. I'm the Senior Solutions Consultant at Bluehub, so it's my role to work with clients to define what their requirements are and which add-ons are going to work best for them, and then I hand that over to our team of consultants to then do the implementation and any consultancy. And of course I work for Bluehub, and that's who's hosting the webinar today, and our focus is all around cloud accounting apps and the ecosystem around it. So we work with accounting firms to help you bring more of your clients to the cloud, and then practically help you transition each client by helping them select the apps and then set them up with our team. So that's what we do, and a lot of the clients we work with are actually in the wholesale sector, and in fact any of the inventory-based sectors, so e-commerce, retail, they really are our main bread and butter. And we do a lot of work also with project management style businesses, so professional services, creative services, and so on. So I'm really interested in this area because I think in general Xero and QBO get tagged with this small business brush or even micro business brush, and really it's the use of the ecosystem that really helps us expand into larger companies and more complex sectors. So we're going to dive into it a lot more obviously through this webinar, but in short the answer isn't my client too big for Xero. It depends on the client, but you can probably get larger clients onto Xero and QuickBooks than you currently think. So if you do want to follow us, you can follow me. I'm at Guy Earnshaw on all social media platforms, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And then Bluehub, we are at blue_hub on Twitter, and of course you can find us on LinkedIn and Facebook too, so strongly urge you to come and speak to us. And that isn't just outside of the webinar, that's inside the webinar too, guys. So what I'm going to ask is, you can all see now on your control panel, you have an area that says questions, and all I want you to do right now is head over there and simply say, "Hi Guy, good morning, ask me what I had for breakfast." I just want to hear that you can hear me, and see that you can use it. It's coming through now. Hilary Dyson, you were the first one on there. Fantastic, and now they're really flowing in. Oh, we're getting foreign languages too. Hola, buenos dias. That's all the Spanish I'm doing, guys, don't worry. Perfect, this is great, fantastic, guys. So, another thing that we like to do, as well as having you ask questions, so towards the end I'm going to answer your questions. So if throughout this you have any questions pop up, please type them in there and we will have a session at the end where I go through them. And also we're going to run just 1 or 2 polls. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to launch the first poll now, just because it gives us a bit of insight into your current client base. So all I'm looking to know here is, what systems do your wholesale clients currently use? So this is what they use on a majority. So that should be popping up now. If you just start to indicate what they're currently on, and then I'll publish this at the end. Great stuff. So we're over halfway there, guys. The votes are flying in. Really interesting. We'll give it just 1 more second, then I'll close down the poll. Fantastic. So we can see a good majority are actually on Sage 50, and then the rest are on Xero, and only a few on Sage 200, which I'm actually quite surprised to hear. I'd say the majority of clients at Bluehub that we work with in the wholesale sector are moving from either Sage 50 or Sage 200 into the cloud. So that kind of echoes those sentiments, but it looks like there's a fair few people that have clients already on Xero, so that's great. That's going to be really relevant for this. Right, so that's enough of me blabbing on for the intro. Let's dive into the content. So this is what we're going to cover today. We're going to look at wholesaler requirement. So what is it that these companies actually need out of software, both financial and operational? What are the limits of Xero and QBO? So this comes up a lot, and this is why I believe they are seen as small business type solutions. Okay. Then we're going to look at the questions you should be asking your clients when you are helping them with system selection. We'll look at how to use add-ons to help more of these businesses, and that's really the key takeaway from this. And then we'll look at some of the best-in-class add-ons for wholesalers and break them down a little bit too. Okay, so wholesalers, what are their requirements? What is it that these companies actually need from their software? So as well as all the usual things, they're going to need a ledger, they're going to need to be able to accept payments, they're going to need to reconcile invoices. These are some of the more industry-specific requirements. So they're going to sell in multiple units of measure. So this means they're going to sell individual items, cases of items, pallets of items, maybe even containers of items. And we need an inventory solution that can manage that. They're often, in fact always, going to have price tiers on their products. Wholesalers will have different agreements with different customers for different prices based on maybe even different quantities. So it's really important that the system can manage that also. More and more we are seeing wholesalers using some form of EDI. EDI is an integration companies have to pass forward order information, so to send invoices, receive delivery instructions, and so on. And if you're dealing with large retailers or you're dealing with large couriers, often they will request some form of EDI integration. Shipping and logistics too, the goods need to leave the warehouse. And often they'll have multiple warehouses, and if they don't have multiple warehouses in reality, they may have different sections of their warehouse they use for different reasons. So this that we're seeing here in this image, this may be a picking guy that our happy worker is going along and collecting the orders. There may be another section of the warehouse that is just holding general stock that will replenish this area. There may be a quarantine or a goods received area also. So often they're going to have multiple warehouses and multiple warehouse locations. They're also going to want per location min and max, not orders actually, but this would be stock levels. So within each of these bins that we can actually see in this warehouse right now, often they're going to want to know in the system when these are nearing an empty position so that they can be replenished from our holding stock in a different location. They're going to have multiple sales channels. This could be guys on the phones or on email taking orders, but equally it's likely to now be e-commerce websites, B2B ordering portals, even marketplaces. So we need to think, how can we receive all the orders from those sites and also update those sales channels with stock availability? We're also going to need weights and dimensions, and that's going to play heavily into our shipping and logistics and EDI information for couriers. Sometimes they may have complex products. So I class complex products as anything that contains any of the three following things: expiry dates, batch numbers for traceability, and bill of materials, so component parts within the finished items. These would define complex products. They're also going to have purchasing, and this purchasing may need to be more comprehensive than just raising a purchase order to a supplier down the road. Often a lot of these companies are bringing in stock from Asia and will look to maximize the capacity of the container that they're bringing it in on to ensure that they get the most value really out of that delivery. So purchasing needs to start to take into account things like weights and dimensions also. And then finally, we need to think about quantity discounts, slightly different from price tiers, because price tiers tend to be specific to specific customers or groups of customers, whereas quantity discounts could be applied to any customer that is purchasing a specific product by a certain amount. So what I'm assuming is that a lot of the accountants here are probably recognizing how many of these features are actually more to do with the operations of the business, things like the warehouse management. But when it comes to software selection for these companies, actually that's some of the most key requirements that they're going to have, because that's really where their efficiencies are gained, is within the warehouse and within the order management process. So it's really important that the software covers that. So now, let's have a bit of a discussion around the limitations of Xero, then we'll move on to QuickBooks, and then we will bring up a screen where we compare the two. So there's a lot said about the transaction limits within Xero, and I will get to that at the end. But some key limitations that are worth pointing out at the moment are that there are a maximum of 4,000 tracked inventory products you can have in Xero. So that means if you have a product range greater than 4,000, you won't be able to manage the stock on hand for that. So you're just only able to include a sale price, a cost price, and make it easy to raise invoices without actually being able to see the stock availability. It also only covers simple products. There is no bill of materials, no area for batch numbers or expiry dates, and again, it only has a single price tier. Other key things that it's missing is there's no EDI integration possible, and there's no integration with third-party logistics companies. There's also very little to no warehouse management. You can do some things where you'll include a warehouse location within the product description, but obviously that's kind of messy and the customer would see that on any invoices. So I class it as being no warehouse management. You're unable to do any back ordering, drop shipping, and in fact order management in general is just non-existent. You can have a draft invoice, an approved invoice, and an invoice is awaiting payment. Nowhere in Xero does it cover whether that item's been picked, packed, dispatched, whether it's got a tracking number. There's no way of managing that within Xero. And also it's fixed to an average costing method. So most, not all, but most companies will want to work in a first in, first out costing method, whereas Xero and actually many account systems tend to favor an average costing method. So then finally, it comes to the transaction limit. So I'm sure most of you have heard this limit of 1,000 sales invoices and 1,000 purchase invoices, and that's what's stated by Xero within the community and a few other articles. What is worth noting is these limits are soft limits. They do not actually max out the system. As soon as you hit 1,000 sales invoices, you're not going to get an error message pop up. It really is a soft limit. So beyond that, you may start to notice some slowing of the system. So there's no actual scenarios with any of the Xero literature where they talk about stretching the system, where they say the actual point where noticeable slowing begins. So really all we have to go on is this 1,000 sales invoices, 1,000 purchase invoices. The hard limits, which is where I think some confusion comes, is around the API. So this is the plug socket within Xero that allows the add-ons to speak to it. Now that does feature hard limits of 1,000 calls per day. So what that means is if an app like Receipt Bank is trying to send more than 1,000 individual calls to Xero, it will actually max out for that day and restart in the next 24-hour period. So I believe these two limits have become confused, and a lot of people see the transaction limit as a hard limit. Okay. Again, we're going to pull this up with all of these details in a comparison in a moment, but we're just discussing around the limits of both systems. So similarly to Xero, there's no real order management within QuickBooks. You can mark stock as received on purchase invoices, but again, there's no pick, pack, stage, dispatch, tracking numbers. There's also no warehouse management, no third-party logistics, and no EDI, very similar to Xero, and also no back ordering or drop shipping. Interestingly though, QBO does actually work to a first in, first out costing method. So that tends to be suitable for more businesses in general, and also it doesn't have a hard limit on the amount of inventory items you can have in there. Again, there is a reality of inputting a lot of data will start to slow down a system potentially, but they haven't provided any hard limits. All the limits that I'm discussing on the sales invoice side, because this is a question that's come in a couple of times, is on a monthly limit. So for Xero, those soft limits are 1,000 sales invoices and 1,000 purchase invoices a month, whereas the hard API limits are daily. And then as far as how QuickBooks addresses the transaction limits, they openly discuss how it is a soft limit, and they actually don't put any advisory limit. They have a case study on their website where some slowing was noticed at 3,500 transactions within a month. But they do say that you can go beyond this. It's really just what the client's tolerance is for slowing. And I think in general, when technical advice comes from systems, it tends to be more on the cautious side. So you can really start to maximize this. And I have heard anecdotally people getting to over 5,000, in fact, much beyond that on both of these systems. But there are other ways around that too, which we'll get to in the app section. So let's have a look at a bit of a comparison here. So I'm not taking into account the basic Xero or the basic QuickBooks Online. We're looking at people that are, real full limited companies here. So we're going to look at standard and premium for anyone that has multi-currency, and QBO plus. So the item limit, as we said, Xero has 4,000 as a hard limit on tracked items, and QBO has no limit. They both have simple inventory, so there's no bill of materials, no batch, no expiry. They both have single price tiers, so you can't manage multiple price tiers or quantity discounts unless you have it as a separate item within the inventory. There's no warehouse management, no third-party logistics integrations, no EDI, no back order and drop shipping. Limited to no order management in both systems. This is a really key difference and a good question that you can ask your clients when you're trying to work out which system is going to work best for them. And it is worth noting that once you do use an inventory add-on, this section of the costing becomes obsolete because it will pick up its costing and stock valuation from the inventory add-on rather than the accounting system. Then there's a transaction limit, so you say to soft but advised limits of 1,000 and 1,000 per month, and the soft limits there for QBO. And again, It's these areas here where a lot of confusion is caused. And in short, how we get around the slightly harder soft limit of Xero and even this transaction limit within QBO is we use consolidation. So within the inventory apps that we'll discuss in a moment and ERP apps, you're able to do batch invoices and consolidation to reduce that overall transaction number and still keep the granular detail within the inventory app for reporting purposes. Okay. So with the question of, is my client too big for Xero, we have to address the size of the company and the turnover. So this is really a complete oversimplification, and the aim of these webinars is to just start to expand your understanding and knowledge. And so sometimes an oversimplification can give us a common language that we can discuss things on. So that's the aim of this. This isn't concrete. But anyone that's under $500,000 turnover, I think a cloud accounting app with 1 or 2 spreadsheets is a completely satisfactory system. You're going to be able to do most of the reporting. There's not going to be a great slowing of process. And so I think for most, that's pretty comfortable, although add-ons can certainly come into play too. This next tier of people, the $500,000 to $2 million turnover range, you'd be looking at one of the cloud accounting apps with one of the more basic inventory apps. Anyone that's in the 2 to 10 million turnover range, and in fact this can exceed up to 15 million, it really is dependent on the business, but that's when I'd be using a cloud accounting app with one of the inventory/ERP apps. Again, we'll get to the specifics for these in a moment. And then finally, for people that are over the 10 million mark, you're going to start to begin to look at enterprise level solutions. And again, we'll come to those examples later. But just quickly, I want to run one more poll that I was going to do on my last slide, and I just want to gauge if you have more clients on Xero or on QBO. I think it's pretty evident from the last poll, but let's just have a quick launch of this and see where everyone stands. The votes coming in really fast for this one, guys. It's fantastic. Okay, just a few more people left to vote. Okay, we'll close it down there and share. So we can see 84% of you have more of your clients on Xero than on QBO. And yeah, I think that's pretty telling and how I feel about this audience as well. I think over the coming 12 months we will be doing more QBO content, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But for the remainder of this, as far as the app selection goes for either the basic or the inventory ERP apps, it really doesn't matter now if the client's using QBO or Xero. All the apps I'm going to discuss work with both systems. So here are a few questions that I recommend you ask your clients that are in Wholesale when they're looking to move into the cloud or looking to use one of these inventory apps. Here are some of the questions worth going through. So what are your sales channels, and get details of this. If they say we sell online and we sell in a trade counter, we need to have a follow-up question of what e-commerce platforms do you use specifically, and what till system do you have in place on the trade counter. So really dive into those sales channels in more detail. What are the highest number of prices for a single product? So I've seen this be over 300 different prices for one product, and that becomes really unmanageable in a system. So worth having that discussion, and often that will mean you'll have to do some business advisory work on how they could maybe look at a different pricing strategy to make it fit a system. And again, see if they provide quantity discounts and if that's flat across all their customers, or if there are price tiers to those discounts too. Understand who they use for shipping and logistics, and if they outsource all of that to a third-party logistics company. Understand if they have multiple warehouse locations, and if they're in different geographical locations, or if they're just merely different splits of the same warehouse. Again, diving into 3PL. The number of sales and purchase orders a month, right? That's going to start to indicate, are we going to be able to do this without consolidation and without batching of the invoices, or are we going to be able to run all the granular information directly into the cloud accounting system? In fact, just quickly on this, if the number of sales and purchase orders do greatly exceed the transaction limits, it's worth asking them if they would be okay to account with consolidated invoices. In general, there's two ways we can consolidate invoices. One is based on the sales channel. So you'll get a summary from your Magento website, a summary from your till system. Others do it on payment type. So if it was paid by Visa, or if it was paid on PayPal, they will go into two different invoices. That style tends to make it easier for bank reconciliation. But if people do a lot of sales on account, they're actually going to need that granular information in the accounting system too. So again, that's a deeper conversation than just that singular question. Turnover, and again, projected. You want these systems to last. No one wants to go for an implementation for it to last 12 to 24 months. The minimum acceptable amount, in my opinion, is 3 years. And it is a great deal of upheaval for a company to implement one of these, and cost too. So you want 3 years of life in it. So understand if in that turnover, if in that time their turnover is going to start to exceed 10 million, and they may start looking at enterprise solutions, it may be worth looking at a few of those earlier on. And then the number of products that they sell, again, that's going to be a real key indicator on which apps they can use. And do they have complex products? And then finally, do they have multi-currency? And if they do, are they happy to do this at a fixed rate, or do they want this to be like a daily fluid pull from a financial exchange website? So these are just a few questions. Obviously, these all knock on to further questions, and it is important that we take a really deep dive with our clients when we are selecting which add-ons are going to work. You can't simply just fill out this, send it off to an inventory provider and ask for their questions. You're going to need to know the details a lot more. But this is a good place to start if you're not already asking these types of questions. So now let's take a look at what benefit there is to wholesalers from using some of these apps, meaning the inventory and inventory ERP type apps. I'll get to the difference shortly. So if they want 3PL integration, this is how we can start to provide that. Bill of materials, any and all of the apps that we're going to discuss include bill of materials, assemblies and disassemblies, so we can start to accommodate for some of our complex products. They'll have all some level of warehouse management, at least different warehouse locations, and most will have things like aisle, bin, zone locations too, as well as min and max stock for those locations. Ability to manage their price tiers and quantity discounts, direct integrations with e-commerce that work both ways, so you're able to update the website if something's out of stock, if you don't want to put that on back order. B2B ordering portals. This is actually an area that more and more of our wholesale customers that we've brought on board within the last 18 months, and they're all either doing this or hoping to do this in the next 12 months. And really, it's removing the admin from those customers that are sending them email and phone orders where they're having to have a member of staff type that order in. This allows them to give their customers a login where they can show them their products at their price tiers and allow them to make all of their decisions while purchasing. You're also able to do cool stuff like pop up different discounts, advise them on other products, so you can do some e-commerce type sales techniques. So it's a real area of interest for a lot of these businesses. And if you're struggling to sell a company on moving to cloud, I actually think this is a really good soft spot for them to start to open up their mind to it. Traceability again, so this is coming into anyone that needs batch or serial numbers. Improved reporting, so we're not just going to be able to look at a P&L for a certain product. By using these apps, integrating all of our sales channels, we can look at how certain products perform on certain sales channels within a certain time period, and even when a specific salesperson is manning that sales channel. So the reporting you get is actually a lot more practical and a lot more useful to the business and from these inventory apps than it would be from something like Xero or QBO. Edi integrations, again, these come in two forms, either direct or indirect. Get to that in a moment. And then improved purchasing. So this isn't just thinking about the container loads that I discussed before, where we need to take into account the weights and dimensions. We're also thinking about tools like smart buying techniques that are using predictive technologies to look at your incoming orders and your min-max stock levels to pre-generate purchase orders for your approval, and that kind of purchasing is really of interest to most, again, of the wholesale clients I work with. Okay, so these are just, again, a few of the reasons, but they're the main ones that I think you'll find that you'll be discussing with your clients. These are a lot of their pain points and interest areas. So the question is now, which ad and app is going to work best? And if you've been on any of our Blue Hub webinars, you know the answer to this isn't just simple, it's this one. It really is a case of diving into those questions in much more detail, then having adequate demos on the potential systems and really running through it in detail with your clients. Ideally, it's good to look at the partners of any of these websites. You'll see Blue Hub on there, and work with them to decide if it's going to work best for your client. So, Sin7, Stitch Labs, Deer, and Unleashed are 4 of the best add-ons, in my opinion, for wholesalers. I think TradeGecko deserves a shout out here as well. It does work very well. We've just done less work with it over the last 2 years. So, the reason why I picked these 4 as well is I think it gives us a good split between our basic inventory, and I use that term lightly, to our inventory and ERP apps. So here's roughly what it looks like. Sin7 and Stitch Labs. Firstly, they're far more expensive than Deer and Unleashed, but they are currently more feature-rich, and the features that they have are more suited to larger companies. So the first one that really stands out is they both have direct EDI. So again, anyone that is selling to any of the supermarkets, large retailers, and even Amazon Vendor Central, you're going to need EDI for you to get the best price on your products. They do give you better rates when you use EDI. So it's a real key area for everyone. And both of these systems actually include EDI in there. Now, prior to this happening, you'd need a standalone EDI app, similar to Crossfire. And it isn't cheap, you know, it's several £100s a month on top of your inventory app. Now, while these are, you know, a good few £100 more a month than Deer or Unleashed, it does tend to net out being slightly cheaper for EDI through them. And also they do have some custom development in there where they can link directly with your third-party logistics company. So with that type of integration, you're not looking to just send the logistics company orders that you need to be dispatched, but you're also going to want to pull over what stock do you have on consignment there, so that you're able to keep a grasp on that. So these are just the overarching primary differences between the inventory ERP apps and these more basic inventory apps. They all obviously include the standard features like order management, back ordering, warehouse management, drop shipping, the complex products. They all have really great APIs. They all manage price tiers, most of them manage quantity discounts. But these are just 2 real key areas that larger companies, these companies that are over 5 million, are really going to be interested in. So some other features that are just worth discussing are around the integration. So as I mentioned, all 4 integrate with both Xero and QBO. These 3 all integrate with the main marketplaces. So again, this is a real growing trend at the moment, Amazon especially, but eBay as a sales channel is increasing with more and more of our clients too. So this is a real key area. Why would you spend loads of money on Google AdWords bringing traffic to your website when you can go on somewhere like Amazon that has thousands of people searching every single second? So that's why companies are really interested in these areas, but they don't want the manual hassle of entering these orders. So by having one of these apps, it enables them to do that without increasing their admin load or staff load. They mostly integrate with all of the major e-commerce providers. I will say that with Magento and Shopify, you're covering the vast majority of the internet. And then if you include WooCommerce in there too, which is powered by WordPress, that really is the vast majority of anyone that's selling on e-commerce. I think coming up in 4th is BigCommerce, and as you can see, 3 of the 4 do have integrations with that. Next are our shipping integrations. So this is really key for anyone that has their own warehouse. And again, I'd say a majority of my wholesale clients do actually still have their own warehouses. They've not all outsourced it. Well, if so, they're going to need to arrange their shipping, printing labels, pulling in the tracking numbers and all that. So currently, for most, this is a manual process. They'll have their orders open on something like Sage, they'll bring up DPD on a website and manually enter all their orders, print off each label, stick it on the box, and it is a real time drain for a lot of these companies and rife for human error. When you're typing in hundreds of different labels, one after another, you can imagine it's quite monotonous. It's really easy to mess that up. So what all of these apps do, and anyone in the UK market, Ship Theory is really the product we see most people using. And this allows you to integrate directly with people like Royal Mail, DPD, FedEx, all the major shipping providers, and remove that manual step. You can link them with label printers, and also the integrations tend to work both ways, so that once that delivery is booked through the shipping app like Ship Theory, that will then update Sin7, for instance, with the tracking number for that order. So that's really powerful. It makes sure that all the right information goes to the correct order, and it also does it without any human intervention. So Ship Theory and ShipStation, definitely the two biggest players in this area. Anyone that's in the US that's online, ShipStation is really a fantastic system, and in my opinion is leading the way with practical automations. And in fact, I think a lot of the inventory apps will be looking at what they've done there to improve some of that automated workflow. So now we're going to move on to the scenario of if our client is over 10 million. But just before we leave this screen, we've actually had a lot of success with Sin7 for some of these larger clients, these people that are in the 5 to 15 million turnover range, let's say. And one of the main reasons for that is that Sin7 actually do custom development on each instance. So that means that your customer may require some form of automation, a specific field that they need to report on, the removal of a feature that's within a system. Well, Sin7 do development sprints every 2 weeks where they will customize it. Often there is a cost for this, but it's actually really, really low for the work that they do. And it really does allow people to stay within this realm of systems a lot longer. Than if they didn't have that, they'd have to move to one of the enterprise solutions. So just worth noting. So if your client is over 10 million, then you can look at some of the inventory ERP apps that we just discussed there. Sin7 especially stands out, and that's where we've had the most success with larger clients. We'll take a look at the next solutions as well. So once a company is over the 10 million, over the 15 million marks safely, they are going to need to be looking at moving to an enterprise level solution, and that will mean leaving Xero and QBO. So they're going to be looking at systems like NetSuite, like SAP, like Dynamics 365 and Exact. Now I've picked these 4 solutions because they're cloud-based. Obviously, some of you may know Exact is going through some pretty drastic changes at the moment in the UK, so it's worth just giving that a bit of space for the coming months. Another system that does really stand out as an enterprise level system for wholesalers, even though it's not in the cloud, is Sage 200. Often it's very costly, it's not in the cloud, so people don't like it, but it is actually still very feature rich for a lot of these companies, so it's not the worst solution for them. Obviously it isn't cloud based, which has some issues. So why may a company that's around the 10 million mark want to stay with an inventory ERP app rather than move into one of these enterprise level solutions? It's 2 main things: it's time and it's cost. So for a company that's in the 10 to 15 million range, something like a setup of Sin7 may cost them around £15,000, let's say. If they were going to implement something like SAP, that's closer to £150,000. The average time for us to implement a Sin7 based solution, you're looking at 3 to 4 months. With a SAP or any of these enterprise level solutions, you're really looking at 12 months and then another 6 months of really fine tuning. And the reason why it's so much extra cost and so much extra time is because they're greatly more customizable. And as businesses grow, they tend to have more unique processes and they become slightly more inflexible. So the software has to bend to what they're doing. So that's why these systems cost so much. And you can see when there's, nearly 100 times difference in the price, why a company would be keen to stay in these solutions for a little bit longer. So that's why we have a lot of companies coming to us between that 5 to 10 million range that are planning to use these inventory apps for the next 3 to 5 years as they balloon above the 10 million mark. And then when they're in that 10 to $15 million range, they will then look at what is the best time to implement one of these solutions. Fantastic. So that really is starting to bring us towards the end of this. We're going to move on to some questions shortly. So if you haven't already done so and you do have a few questions, start firing them over, and I will run through them shortly. So what's next? If you do have clients who are in the wholesale industry and you feel they fall into that those two middle ranges, they're over 500,000, under 10 million, and you want to move them into wholesale, the first thing to do is go and ask them those questions. So hopefully you took a screenshot of them. This will be made available in the new year, and so if not, we can grab it then. And then what I'd strongly recommend is, as I did before, is arrange a consultation with someone like BlueHub or, even one of our competitors, if you like. But I hope what's come across here is the software requirements for wholesalers stem far more into operations than just finance. So that's why it's wise for accountants to start to think about who they could bring on board as an advisor and to take a look at this. So if you do have any clients that you may want to bring to BlueHub, we've made it really simple for you to do so. You'd simply go to bluehub.co.uk. The first thing you see here is a big button that says book a call. You head on to here, you're then able to see currently my availability, so you'll have your initial consultation with me, and there is no charge to this. So you arrange a time with your client that's going to work well for you. You select it, you come on here, you book a time, you let me know what it is that you want to discuss, and then we give you a call then. And really what we do during this time is ask your client a lot of questions about what it is their current systems do that they're happy with, what their current systems do that they're unhappy with, and where they're looking to go. And then from that, we'll recommend which of the apps are going to work best and then offer them a demo for free. So rather than them setting up a demo account and then spending time setting that up, we can use our existing demo account, make it relevant to their business and show it them. So it just saves everyone a whole lot of time, and they've got the benefit of us doing this every day. This is all the work we do, is working with clients on selecting which apps are going to work best for them and then implement them from these specific sectors that we're covering in this series. So if you have clients on Amazon, we ran a webinar earlier this month that was incredibly popular on this topic, so much so that we're actually rerunning it again on the 12th of December at 3 p.m. So that's to allow people from the US to join, because we had some people waking up at 5 and 3 in the morning to join the last webinar. But if you did miss it, I strongly suggest you come along if you do have clients on Amazon. It's a lot of interesting topics that we cover. Okay, so let's start answering your questions. First, I just want to thank everyone for your time and joining us today. I understand it's Thursday, so a lot of work to be finished for the week. But yeah, your involvement in these webinars really do help make them as useful as they are. So I'm just going to scroll through some of these questions. Forgive the silence as I read them, and then we'll dive through, okay? So yeah, just to clarify again, because it did come up a few times, the transaction limits in Xero that I brought up before, 1,000 sales invoices, 1,000 purchase invoices, that is per month. Same with the 3,500 transactions example using QuickBooks, that's per month. The API limits are daily, and there is also a per minute limit too, okay? Add a good rhyme to it. So have you tested putting a silly amount of inventory items into QBO? No, David, we actually haven't. You know, we have done some tests with Xero, but there are articles online of people doing just this. So if you have a search for how many transactions QBO can take or how many transactions Xero can take, there are a few articles out there on this topic. Many people are asking for a link to this webinar. We will be making this webinar available in the new year, and we may rerun it again. We do have some membership services. Anyone that's part of that, of course, you're going to get access to it very soon. But yeah, in the new year, this is when it will be made available to everyone else. Great question here. Is there a system that works with wine merchants and bonded warehouses? It comes from Sue Palmer. So yes, there are. It's a very specific industry and one that I must say that I don't have a great deal of personal experience in. But if you head over to the Xero marketplace and look at the inventory systems, I think there's one called Vivino and one other. And obviously with wine, there's even more complications with pricing and value because it obviously changes over time. So it is necessary to have an industry-specific item, especially for wine. But anyone else that works in the beverage industries, so for example, there's a lot of people at the moment in the brewing industry in the UK and the US. Unleashed has actually been a fantastic system for those companies, and they've had a lot of positive case studies from that too. But yeah, for wine it is slightly different, and you will need a specialist app. So, question here. Someone has a client here with a few coffee shops. They're looking to expand this to 20 coffee shops, and the question is, would Xero cope with the day-to-day business of 20 small coffee shops? And that comes from Harry. So it would depend on, I would actually say yes, because the customers that are coming into the coffee shop, we're not going to need to know how much a specific Joe Bloggs has spent with us over the year or what he may owe us on his coffee tab. So in my opinion, a summary of transactions would be absolutely fine. So for that, I will be looking at a system maybe like Vend or EPOS Now, one of the retail EPOS systems, and I will be looking at using that. That way they can do a cash up and just send over a daily import into Xero. So for each store there would be one import per day, so that's 20 a day. So that's what I'd be looking at. Just to be clear, with a coffee shop, obviously it's a bit outside the scope of the people we were talking about today. They're very unlikely to need an inventory app. Just reading through a few more. What works well for people that are selling, you know, things like fruit and veg? So really any of the systems that have comprehensive expiry dates and batch. So for me, I actually really like Dia in that example. It has great expiry dates, great batch, and it also works still in a FIFO costing method with batch, which not all of the add-ons do. I think also it is worth shouting out Unleashed in that department too, because it has a great expiry date system, so it tends to work really well for them. Okay, we'll answer just one or two more. There's quite a few. So someone's asked, how can you invite clients to our webinars? If you simply share the link when you sign up, the GoToWebinar page, it tells you what's included. You can just forward on that link to your customers and they're able to sign up. It isn't exclusive to accountants. Oh, this is brilliant. Someone's corrected me on my wine inventory system. So I said Vivino, which I think is an app where you can take a picture of a wine label and it tells you about that wine. The actual app is called Vinsight. So thank you to Catherine Lowe for that. You've come in and saved the day. So yeah, Vinsight for wine merchants. So yeah, that about wraps it up. Thank you everyone for your time. Again, if you do want to get in touch with us, I'm at Guy Earnshaw on Twitter, Instagram, and you'll find me on LinkedIn, and we are Blue Hub on all social medias, so come and speak to us if you haven't already, and if you follow us on LinkedIn, that's the best place to find out about our up-and-coming webinars and different sessions that we're doing. So again, just thank everyone for turning up. I can see the vast majority have still stuck around till now, so I think it's time for me and all of you to get back to work. So thank you once again, and have a great day.